but he said, we talked to Damon Allen and Damon wants you here. So we're keeping you. So it was like, it just showed me, wow, like, the importance of teammates, the importance of trust. I didn't know Damon prior to that year, so I didn't have a pre-existing relationship. That was the first training camp that I'd been in Toronto, and that was Damon's first year in Toronto. So there was no like history where he's like, yeah, we're boys. And of course he's going to say Mike. Like he could have said, no, let's go with the young kid. Like Mike's not ready or like whatever. I'm not familiar with, but he trusts me. And at that point in time, I realized how precarious this job is, right? I had taken it for granted up until that point. And I sometimes think about that day and think, holy man, that was like a close call. And that would have changed the whole rest of my life.
Mike Morreale, thank you so much for joining me, man.
My pleasure. It's great to see you and great to be on this show. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, it's great to have you on the show. I mean, it's like CFL royalty. I'm looking at you. I mean, I know that we say that and we understand the game and we know each other, but I was just looking up some of your stats, and you forget these things after a few years, right? Like you're like a 12-year player. How many Grey Cups was it? 3 or 4? I
went to 3. Well, I'm lucky enough to win 2, but went to 3. You know how it goes. You think you're going to win them all, but I had an early one in my second year, and it's not that easy, as you know, as you go through a lot of years. So I was happy to get to the ones I got to.
Yeah, that's awesome. My first year was in Saskatchewan in '97, and we were like Cinderella story all the way there, and then Doug Flutie kicked our butt all over the place. But we thought we were going back every year, and I don't think we got a sniff for 5 years. Like not even.
That's the thing.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's good. And your career, I mean, you came out of it pretty much unscathed. I think like you did pretty well health wise, didn't you?
I was very fortunate. I never missed a game my whole career, which is crazy. So I played 200 and some odd games and probably played in 40. I never should have been on the field, quite frankly. But you know how it works. You just this and that, tape and whatever it takes to get going. And I wouldn't change anything for the world. But, as I get older, as we get older, the aches and pains just become more prevalent. But fortunately enough, I'm in good shape. So I got nothing to complain about.
I did not know that you didn't miss a game in how many games?
Well, 12 seasons plus whatever playoffs. So I haven't done the math, but probably 240, 250.
I have the number on my wall if I had that stat. There's only one other guy I know that did it, and that's Roger Aldag, Saskatchewan, 244 games. And he knows. We all know that stat. I think it's in the locker room, probably still in Taylor Field, if there was a Taylor. That's good. Awesome. And then afterwards you came out, and what happened right afterwards? We were talking a little bit about like transitioning out of football. So what happened for you right after you decided that it was time to hang them up?
Yeah, I was really fortunate, and you'll appreciate this based on all the guys we've played with and even your own journey, that I had a soft landing. So when you're done playing professional sports and playing the CFL, especially because of the pay scale, you don't retire and then just put your feet up. You literally have to reimagine yourself and become something different and enter the workforce at a much later age. So the length of time you play is great, but it also puts you in a disadvantage after. I was fortunate. I spent a lot of my career, 9 of my 11 years, as a player representative and a member at large of the Players Association. There was a opportunity that as a board, we helped create a marketing opportunity at the Players Association. The guy that we had hired just previously had left the position, and there was a vacancy. And Stu Laird at the time, who was the president, thought that I would be a great addition to the landscape of the CFLPA. So that was my soft landing. I loved it. It was right off the heels of playing. So the juices are still there, and you're interacting with all the guys, and you're going to games, and you're immersed now in the business side of the sport, which I really enjoyed. That was of interest to me. I didn't care so much about coaching or any of this other stuff. I enjoy it, but it wasn't my thing. I really liked how it worked, how the pieces came together. So the initial years of that job were interesting because I was more of a policeman than anything. Because based on our collective bargaining agreement, the players had certain intellectual property rights that they owned and the Players Association owned. And at that time, the CFL was just using them willy-nilly however they wanted without any sort of remuneration or anything. So the initial years were spent just policing. And that helped me get inside of the team businesses, inside of the league businesses, And,
To stop there, so that was that was a change in the CFL, as I recall, because when we first started and all the way until, I mean, I don't think I cared about. Yeah, I was hoping somebody wanted to put something on my jersey,
right.
but there's no lineman. Rare indeed that would have been. But
Yeah.
like there was intellectual property that they were already dealing with. Was that because of the internet at the time, or was it because of like what was driving that? Do you
Nobody
know?
was paying attention, right? So a lot of these things, if there's nobody really looking at that side of the business per se, because as a players association, you're looking for what happens mostly in and around the field, right?
Yeah.
Disciplinary issues and making sure guys are set up after football, etc. But those CBAs are big documents, and they include a lot of information. And we just noticed that, listen, there's a rule in here, and once you sign a CFL contract, and it still is to this day, the CFLPA gets the rights to intellectual property. And there are certain rights that are afforded to the CFL, but in group situations. So if you wanted a player from every team and 10 teams and you wanted to take photos and do stuff, that was allowed. But if you wanted to choose Dan Comiskey as part of an endorsement for a partner, they were just using your name and likeness and putting you beside a Ford truck, for instance. That
Yeah.
needed to be compensated. There was no mechanism there to do so. So we created the mechanism essentially, which led to a lump sum payment on an annual basis, which still exists today, if I'm not mistaken, of about $500,000 a year that the league pays the CFLPA to blanket those rights for those group shots. So there was no payment at all for that. That was just kind of, they took advantage of it. And, I found that over time, working with the league and with the teams, that they were just doing partnership deals and throwing in, yeah, well, if 5 guys show up, and yeah, this guy will endorse this and this guy will endorse that. It's all well and good. And you and I were the same. Yeah, in terms of, I was happy to be endorsed. I was happy to get my name recognized, to get my picture out there. And then you realize, okay, well, there's people making money off the back of this. And, we're seeing it now in the NCAA, right? That's the old, the nil has changed the landscape, maybe way far in the other direction, but it's basically compensating people for people making money off the back of their name and likeness and image. So that was the initial part of the job. And after we kind of got through kind of the the policing, it became more collaborative. And then we were able to work with the leagues and the teams and work on things that we were both mutually benefiting from, and we were adding value to the sponsorship deals, and they were providing compensation in return. So that was really cool for me because I was very much a player first person, and I still am in my role now. And I always wanted what was best for the player. So that was to get back to your initial point, that was really such an amazing opportunity for me that I just fell into, coming off of being, forcibly retired. Me and Rob Hitchcock were shown the door the same day, the old forced retirement trick. So this to me was just the next best thing. But and then that eventually moved up to becoming president of the Players Association. But in that time, with my relationships with players, I felt like I had a really good relationship across the league, not just the teammates I played with. They would call me and, hey, I got a buddy that, needs his pension. And it never was a buddy. It was the guy that was making the phone call. And the stories. There's a lot of troubling stories that, these players leave, especially the US players, and they go back home and they don't have the cachet because nobody knows of them, their CFL days back home and all this other stuff. So that really started my way of thinking and I include it to what I'm doing today. The players are the most important asset of any kind of sports league and any sort of business related to sports. So, it was really important to represent them and make sure that they were able to be compensated appropriately. And it took time. To your initial point, like, we were all just happy being involved,
I
right?
think that's a
So
Canadian mindset to it,
very
and I'm
much
not disparaging it towards anybody, especially our American friends who we love playing
right.
those games, right? But I was just this kid from Windsor, Ontario, who grew up in Saskatchewan. You want to put a jersey on my back and let me go
Yeah,
hit people for a living? This is a dream come true for me. Yeah, pay me 40 grand my first year. I'm going to do that.
exactly.
Right, this is great. But now we're I mean, I don't know, we're like closing in on a couple of
Yeah.
big numbers in terms of age, right? Like I'm 52, so I look and go, I maybe could have taken some money and invested it somewhere, back then and pushed
Right.
for it, right? And
But we
push.
wanted this success, and we played at a time where the league was precarious, right? Like the game was always been good, but the operations of the league, we're going to the U.S., we're leaving the U.S., we're gaining Ottawa, we're losing Ottawa, we're gaining Ottawa, we're losing Montreal, we're gaining Montreal, Toronto's going bankrupt, Hamilton's going bankrupt, and that
Yeah.
was my and your kind of existence. So we were
Well,
just like,
your beginning was 95. So you would have, like, they were, I guess,
yes,
I started in 97. And I know I was talking to Chris Morris about this one time. And he was saying, like, you
oh,
don't understand what it was like last year.
crazy,
Not last year, 6 years ago in 96.
yeah,
He said they won the Grey Cup. And he said they didn't have a party or a banquet for the Grey Cup. They got their rings. They just sat, I mean, it's all pomp and
oh
circumstance.
yeah, yeah.
You get it. It's wonderful. They got their rings set down in their lockers, and the note to the players was, "Go cash your check before the end of the day, because we don't know
Oh,
if it's amounts."
it's incredible.
But
We
saying
went to
that
the
as professional athletes, like
yeah we went to the Grey Cup in '99 with Hamilton, and I'll never forget getting on the team bus to go to the airport to go to Winnipeg. And there was an article in the Spectator, the local Hamilton paper, that our owners at the time were complaining that we're going to the Grey Cup because it's going to cost them more money. And if we win, it's even going to cost them even more money. I'm like, oh my God, these are the things though that as proud Canadians, and I was a CFL fan from when I was 5 years old. I would have done anything to be on that football field.
yeah,
And, I was so proud of, and I still am, but I was still so proud of just ensuring that this league was there forever. I would have done a ton of stuff. And I was involved in 5 collecting bargaining agreements, and I can tell you, we gave back as players a lot to help
hmm
the league move forward. And the salary cap when I started was like 2.1 million. Now it's 6 and change or whatever it is. And what I made at my highest salary, guys are making in year 2. And guys that aren't starters, that aren't all stars, and aren't doing this, and that's fine. I'm happy for it. But the business has changed dramatically, and it was very cool for me to at least have a peek under the hood at how the business ran, because that really helped me in my current role. Basically creating the CFL of basketball, for lack of a better metaphor.
I love it. So your steps towards this role you're in now. So was it direct right after that? Did you say this is what you learned?
No, no, boy. I wish it was. I put a lot of the after my presidency ended in 2014. There was about 3 years there that I was like having a real job, entering the real workforce, and going to work, and not being in a locker room, and you know how we communicate in a locker room doesn't translate all the time to how you communicate in an office, right? Or how do you interact with people, or how you look at things. So I had to reinvent myself. So I was 43 years old at that time,
Yeah.
and I'm trying to get a job and competing against kids that are coming out of university with MBAs or whatever degrees. And I'm this guy that went to Mac and got a great degree in geography. But what the hell am I going to do? Be a teacher? And no offense to teachers, my mom was a teacher. But like, I didn't have the outside of playing football, which is a big, remove that altogether. That's a whole other story. But outside of that, I didn't have the skill set that others had, and not everybody recognizes the skill set of a football player as, beside a skill set of somebody who's done, started as an account manager, became a director, became a VP, and moved up the kind of corporate ladder. But I would say, and I think you would agree, what we learned in football, I mean, you couldn't go and it's an MBA times 10,
Yeah.
because what you experience on the field, off the field, different cultures, different experiences, different pressures, you can't replicate in any job. It just can't. So, I was forced, I guess, to take shitty jobs, for lack of a better word. And I struggled for about 3 years, right? I struggled like trying to find myself and jumping from one job to another, and trying to reinvent myself. And fortunately enough, I ended up getting a really good job at the end, selling private jets. And that was a pretty cool moment for me, just because I knew I'd be interacting with, the 1% of the 1%. And I had said to my wife, I said, listen, it's a great opportunity. And man, I'm going to meet some cool people. The very first person I met is the founder of the CBL. So not at the time, but he was the guy that I worked with to create what I'm doing now in the Canadian Elite Basketball League.
That's amazing. And what an opportunity.
And
Yeah.
playing in Hamilton as a Hamilton kid, everybody's like, oh, when you're done, the carpet's going to be rolled out for you. It's not rolled out for you. That's not how the world works. You got to earn it. You got to go out and, just because you played professional football doesn't give you anything. It provides you with, the what you need to accomplish what you need to accomplish. But, I that balance, that initial, step from playing to the PA saved me 100%. I don't know what direction I would have gone. I believe I would have been successful. Don't get me wrong, but that
Mhm.
was that point in time. It gave me a chance to get that out of my system a little bit, to appreciate it more. And because when you first, when I first got cut, I was like, I don't want to see the Ticats, talk about the Ticats, watch a game. I hope they lose every game, and that's just the natural reaction of like you're not ready to walk away yet. Somebody pulled it away from you,
Yeah.
but you mature. I've matured a hell of a lot, over time, and I had a lot of fun, and when I was playing, and we got lucky. I think no iPhones and no this and no that. Like we played at a time where you flew under the radar a little bit,
Yeah.
but I've matured incredibly just from those life experiences from, after football on.
Yeah. It's been a growth period. When you were with the CFLPA, how much are they helping? How much are they working on programs to get guys thinking about after their career? I remember them talking about investments,
Right.
and I get that that's important. Retirement's coming up. I'm glad I got my retirement.
Yeah.
That's great. But more so like getting out of the game for those guys that are 5, 6 years, those guys that are 15, 20, Vic Stevenson turning into a teacher after 17 years of
Yeah.
playing. Like how, is there a lot of planning for that after you were done playing and when you were actually helping people?
There was quite a bit of, educational programs and finance and, jobs and, a bunch of stuff that was done. And again, you'll appreciate this. I'd go around the country to every locker room and, present to the players after practice a lot of these opportunities. And the only ones that would show up are the ones that didn't need the help. The guys that you knew were good. Like you knew these
Yeah.
guys that showed up, they had their shit together, and that's why they were there in the first place because they got it. And
Yeah.
then inevitably, the other 50 guys, the minute you leave, are calling you and looking for some help because they need help with this, and this. So, you know, the programs are only as good as the people that utilize them. And, I think every association has to not just take care of its players while they're playing, but most importantly, help them with that transition after they're playing. Because we grow up in this bubble, man. When you're playing professional sports, like your focus is singularly
Sing.
on being successful and
Yeah.
playing football, and you believe you will play forever.
Yeah.
And we were fortunate. You and I are very fortunate. We played for a long time. Now, there's other bad things about playing for a long time. You get beat up and you do all this other stuff and you enter the workforce late. But I wouldn't change not one snap of any play. And I don't even remember them. I just remember the locker rooms and the fun and the excitement of being around people that were just like me.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't remember a lot of the plays. I remember the friends, and I
Yeah.
remember, the occasional won a couple Grey Cups, hoisted that thing a couple times. That was awesome, but it was the dudes, it was
Yeah.
the guys, and it's that one singular thing. We're all trying to do the same thing. We're all
Yeah.
trying to get that championship, right? I
Yeah.
feel like that's one of the big things that we bring to any work field, any workforce, is that you have an understanding that if you have a singular goal between that one group of people, you can actually accomplish big
Oh,
things.
yeah.
I get
It's the
tired
beauty of
of.
football.
Yeah.
Football is the greatest sport for the fact that you are putting together all these different people from all these different backgrounds that all have to come together to achieve something. Like it's not, you can't replicate that too many other places. So
No.
for that, I really appreciated, all that time I spent playing.
Well, and you see this. I don't know if they're even still on the "Diversity is our strength" T-shirts, and I always think they're missing something.
Yeah.
Yeah, diversity is our strength if we're shooting for the same goal.
Yep.
Diversity is not our strength if we're not shooting for the
That's
same
right.
goal.
That's right.
It's
That's
like
right.
you just watch everybody separate. Who's your favorite coach that you ever played for? Head coach. Who's your favorite head man and why?
I have two, and the reason I have two is because they're both equally brilliant and both so radically different that I can't really just pick one. The first one was Don Matthews that I had in Toronto. There has never been a coach like Don Matthews. I don't know if you had a chance to play for Don. Don was so opposite of what a football coach is in terms of get off your feet, lay down, take your helmet off, do whatever, go out, have fun, do this, do that. Just show up 3 hours on game day. That's
Yeah.
it. You come play game day, and I don't care what you do. And he loved being the center of attention. He was a lot of fun to be around, and he was, a bit out there and crazy and the rest of it. But he treated us like men. He expected a lot from us. And if you didn't deliver, you're gone. So the thing with Don is, if you played for him and you followed his way of thinking, you were there. And if you didn't, you were gone immediately. There was just no room for that. So he just taught me a different way, this free way of looking at, the game. And he allowed us to have a lot of fun, which really helped build the locker room chemistry and all these other things, right? The other one is Ron Lancaster, and completely different. Ron was not nearly as gregarious. I could walk by Ron 10 times in the hallway and he'd say hi to me once or twice, and the other 8, he'd just head down doing his own thing. And that was Ron.
Yeah.
But what I appreciated about him is obviously he was an outstanding player and he understood the game. But his thing was the same guys, that time, the 43 or some odd guys that are in this locker room are the same guys I want at the end of the year. So you felt from the very beginning that he was going to allow us to grow together, and he trusted us as a unit. Certainly trusted guys like Danny Mack and stuff to kind of lead the way. And his job was just to make sure that, we got along as a team. He was obviously well prepared in terms of understanding the game and managing the clock and doing all this other stuff. But I don't think there was a better coach in terms of that you respected. I respected Don, but in a different way. I respected Ron because he had been through it like many times over and very successful, very well regarded. Probably could have been, probably would have been a better TV announcer than he was a coach or a GM. I think he was brilliant when it came to that. But he just understood locker rooms. He understood people, and you respected him so much you would do anything to make him happy. And he gave me a chance. He gave me my first chance in my 4th year to be a starter. And he saw something in me and Andrew Grigg at that time. And that was what changed, I think, the course of my career. Like, that was the opportunity. And he was all for giving opportunities as long as you return the favor. So those two individuals, completely different, are far and away the best coaches I've had.
It's funny. I got a story about Ron Lancaster from Saskatchewan, right? Because his playing days. And I guess he used to before in the wintertime games. So you know how cold she gets at Mosaic now. I know how cold she gets.
Yeah.
He used to soak. He'd sit in the locker room with a cigarette in his mouth, soaking his hands in a bucket of ice. And he'd just soak his hands for hours. He would just have them in and out of the ice for hours before the game, and that's how he got ready to go out there and play, which is hilarious. Like, so he's one of those old tough guys, right? It just was one of those, and that's why he expected it. Yep. I only played for him the 1 year I was in Hamilton with you, and he was a GM, and he had getting on in years, and
that was different, yeah.
But he had that same feeling that you weren't getting cut from the team.
Right.
They had that philosophy, which I think Greg is one of the things that Greg did right with that team. I like Greg.
I loved, first of all, I love the fact that Greg Marshall got a chance to be a head coach because he deserved it. And I really think that the only thing that hurt him, and this is, after a couple of years, is that the league, or the team didn't surround him with enough quality coaches to make his job easier. They put a lot of pressure on Greg, and Greg was one that liked to be part of everything. But he was also the guy that made sure there was food in the locker room every day and made sure, there was something about Greg I really admired. And he was thrown in a difficult situation, relative to others. And I don't think he got a lot of support. And, when Ron was moved to GM, I don't think Ron wanted to be GM, but I think they thought, well, we can't get rid of Ron, so we'll move Ron into the GM role. And it's more of a de facto, face. I don't think Ron liked it whatsoever, but he's pretty stoic. He did his thing and he showed up, and, his influence was there. But that was a very transitional time in the Ticats that you were there, right? That was so different from when I started in the Ticats to when, I finished, which would have been 2005. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was traded right with 4 games left in the season back to Edmonton to go win a grade. And it was, Yeah, it was wild because Greg, I could say this, one of the only head coaches that I ever walked away from that I just thought, now there's a guy that actually showed me that he liked me and respected me. You know what I mean? Like it was when I was on the blocks and
Yeah,
they needed to make a change, you know,
yeah,
and I somehow Edmonton was convinced they needed me back, so I was okay with that because it was home for me. I was only gone 12
that's right.
weeks or 13 weeks, but he called me up and he's like, if you want to stay, you can stay. And then
Really?
when I said no. I said I talked to my wife, and we're ready to go back to Edmonton. Edmonton was home, right?
Yeah,
And no hard feelings. He just said, just make sure they pay you because we would have paid you next year. And he
that's
was nice. And he said, I'm not lying to you. Make sure they pay you when you
and
renew.
you trusted him. Like I don't think
Yeah.
he would, right? And he had some challenges moving from moving from the university level and now dealing with guys out of the pros, American pros.
Adrian Belly in his
Well, dealing with Adrian O'Belly any day is difficult.
I
But
love that man. I was just talking to him on Facebook the other day.
oh,
What a hoot. He's a piece of work.
he is a character, to
Yeah.
say the least. I love Adriano. He is something else.
He says I walked into Coach Marshall's office. He says he got so mad at me, he flipped his desk over at me. He says, so I flipped it back.
It's true. Oh, it's true. And they had this but at the same time, they had this mutual respect for one another, right? It was like
They're players, man.
they're players.
Yeah, they're players. That's
They're
right.
passionate, right? And Greg was passionate.
Oh
And
yeah.
that whole Marshall family is a tough family. Like they're a passionate group, right? And so they put him with Adrian O'Belly is like something else.
Belly, first day of camp, he says to me, he says, at some point, me and you are gonna have to figure out who's daddy. And I'm just howling, right? I'm like, oh yeah, we're fighting for sure. And then I blow my calf out, right before the first preseason game, and it carries me all the way through to season. And I end up riding the bench all the way through the season, so I can't say that I know this game for sure. And he says, well, you're lucky. And after that, we were teammates, right? But it was like we were just waiting for that opportunity, right? It was Canadian football at its best.
Oh, you knew it was coming. You knew it was coming.
Beautiful. What about your favorite positional coach? Who would you bring? Who's the first person that comes to mind?
First person comes to mind is Ron Lancaster Jr.
Yeah.
And
Really?
probably for the same reasons. RD was, again, a tough spot being Ron's son, and following in his footsteps. But he was the guy that also gave me my first chance. So he was the one when, I was put into the starter position in my second year in Hamilton. He was the guy that, gave me the confidence to do it. And the one thing that a lot of people don't know, it's funny, I just was talking to Archie Amerson, and Archie and I haven't spoken in 20 years. And Hitch and I have this podcast we do for the Ticats. Anyways, long story short, got a chance to talk to Archie. And Archie reminded me of something that I don't even know why I forgot this, but we didn't have a receiver coach for about 3 years in Hamilton. So RD was the offensive coordinator, but he dealt with the quarterback. So the quarterbacks would go and have their meetings, and we would have, myself and Greg and Flutie and Archie, and that we would hold receiver meetings by ourselves. We'd watch film, we'd watch tape, we'd watch our own practice film, we'd do all that stuff. RD would come in after, and he would implement the offense. And that's what happened. We never had a receiver coach. It was insane, but that's what brought us together because we had to help each other out. Like Archie says, Mike, you and Flutie and Greg made me into a receiver because he was a running back that they turned into a receiver because I had no idea. Nobody coached me except you guys. So I owe you guys everything. I'm like, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
But that was the CFL, right?
Your positional coach wouldn't be a positional coach. Of all the years I played, it was Bruce Beaton. He taught me how to tear apart the game, how to watch film, how to train for players, how to all that stuff. And I loved all my coaches. I mean, early on I got yelled at a lot, so probably not all of them. But it's that player relationship. I think that's probably different than any other league.
Yes. And you look at the sidelines and there's so many coaches. I mean, I know they're capped, but even then, we had about 5 front office staff and about 5 coaches. Like that's what we had. The budget to run the Cats was probably $10 million, and now it's probably 40 or 50.
Yeah.
So it was just a different time. I don't compare them. It just that's what our experience was at that particular time. And I didn't know any better. And I don't care one way or another. I loved every minute of it.
I couldn't figure out how we were playing in Hamilton and there was no place for the team to meet for a meeting.
Isn't it
There's
crazy?
nowhere where you could walk in the room and see everybody.
No, not one room.
What's going on here?
Like that locker room was horrendous, but I was home. Like there was nothing nice about the locker room. Lead paint and rat shit and water that didn't work and saunas that didn't work and terrible carpet and
they go in the holes, just spray them down with a hose and bleach.
Yeah, it's just horrific. The same hose that used to fill up the hot tub would fill up the Gatorade bottle. It's just terrible. But we were still there. If we practiced at 1:30, we were still there at 8:30 in the morning playing cards, playing crib, hanging out, doing stuff. So that's all that matters to me.
Yeah, and you won some Grey Cups, man. Like 99 was big for you. 99, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you guys were unstoppable. Danny Mac had about a half a second, you just gone. I love blocking for him because, you give him a second and a half and the ball's gone, untouchable. Yeah. He was a beauty. Yeah, he was a beauty. What was the toughest thing that you dealt with as a player that changed you? Like the toughest lesson you had to learn as a player?
That's good. Like there's a lot. When I look back, I think there's a lot of things that I did as a young, immature player that I didn't really appreciate until I'm in my role now, right? So, I was engaged at the time to an Olympic swimmer and the Olympics are going on and I wanted to, fly to Australia to watch the Olympics and miss 4 days of practice and expect to play. Like just a stupid, in my mind made a lot of sense and, something I would do. And I'm like, boy, that in hindsight, that was so stupid. And I just, I basically disrespected my teammates and all this other stuff by even wanting to do that stuff. But as you're young and in love and immature, you think you're doing all the right things. And, or I would wear, a hat that wasn't a partner of the team and it would cause controversy. But you're like, I don't care. This is what's important to me. This is not what, I was more selfish at the time.
Yeah.
And then there came a moment when I went to Toronto for my second time in 2002. And I went late to camp. I just came off knee surgery and I was probably 240 pounds, a lot bigger than what I ever played in. And at that time, I think Echeverry was the coach at Toronto and they were trying it like this new H-back position or whatever. So like, listen, you'd be good. You can come in at tight end, H-back, whatever. But I was big. Like I wasn't comfortable big. I was just not in shape big. And went through camp. Damon Allen was a quarterback at the time. And Adam Rita brought me in the office. He said, listen, I just want to let you know you're on the block to get cut. And we're probably going to go with this young kid. And we had made our mind up to go with this young kid. And this is about year 7 or 8 for me. And at that point, it's like, it just hit home, right? I'd never been in that situation before. But he said, we talked to Damon Allen and Damon wants you here. So we're keeping you. So it was like, it just showed me, wow, like, the importance of teammates, the importance of trust. I didn't know Damon prior to that year, so I didn't have a pre-existing relationship. That was the first training camp that I'd been in Toronto, and it was Damon's first year in Toronto. So there was no like history where he's like, yeah, we're boys. And of course he's going to say Mike. Like he could have said, no, let's go with the young kid. Like Mike's not ready or whatever. I'm not familiar with, but he trusts me. And at that point in time, I realized how precarious this job is, right? I had taken it for granted up until that point. And I sometimes think about that day and think, holy man, that was like a close call. And that would have changed the whole rest of my life. And it just got me to realize the importance of, coming to camp prepared, being ready, knowing the playbook, not taking things for granted. And my strength of what made me the player that I was is that I understood the game. I wasn't the fastest, but I knew how to take a hit, go over the middle and move the chains. And that was fine. I was all good with that. I didn't know I wasn't going to run 90-yard touchdowns, although I do have a 92-yarder. But I just, it just reinforced me like, okay, you can't take days off. Like you can't rest on the fact that you played 8 years and you could just go out there and you're a shoe in, and who cares about this young kid from wherever he was. And, you know, so that was the biggest lesson I think I learned, among 1,000 lessons. But that moment was like, when your career's on the edge like that, that was like, oof, that was scary. And that changed my perception from that day forward, because there was probably years there where I was coming off of, a top Canadian in the league in Hamilton, coming off a top Canadian league at the Grey Cup, and married to the local superstar and owning restaurants and having a good time. And it gets away from you, man. And you fall into that trap, which is a fun trap, but something's got to give. And I
Yeah.
think, that I got caught up in that until that moment. And I'm like, oh, okay, things got to change. Right. Like I put myself in the situation. No one else did. But when I look back on my career, like there's a lot of those moments now. It's just because, I have time and maturity, like I said, to realize it. But holy man, we lived on the edge sometimes, like on the edge. And I sometimes regret some of the decisions I made, because I wasn't thinking, for everyone. I was just thinking for myself.
Mm-hmm. And not even long term. It's funny because I think that lesson comes to players at some point, no matter what. For me, it was like year two,
Yeah.
because I got beat like a drum by Johnny Scott. I mean,
Oof. Well, that's a tough one.
he just I couldn't do anything right. I was a second come out of my first year. I was a 7-game starter, played in the Grey Cup, wasn't watching film. I was training, but I just wasn't paying attention,
Right.
you know. And they put Ben Fairbrother in to start ahead of me the next week, and I lost my starting position. Now, Ben, did you hear Ben pass away?
Yes, I was just going to say that's incredible,
Yeah,
incredibly sad,
what
incredibly
a
sad.
heart wrenching bike accident. That's
Yeah,
he was a great guy. He's a really nice guy, and when I was my ego at the time losing that position was pretty hurt.
oh yeah,
He broke his ankle that first game. He went to BC. He broke his ankle, and I put my beer down. He broke his ankle, and I put my beer down, and I didn't pick it back up. And I just was like, okay, it's on. And I started watching film, and that's how I got my starting position. And after that, I never lost a starting position again until I retired.
and sometimes you just need, and we're young, right? We're like young 20-year-old kids. We're playing professional sports. The world seems like you can do anything, and then
It's really easy, just go out
yeah.
there and hit people. It's fun, and then yeah, but Johnny, that was a
Oh, Johnny
you know,
was a load, man, a
he was
load.
he was not fun. And then
No.
he got me a few times after that in my career, but I had him pretty much. After that, man, if you think I'm watching film, I was watching him.
Oh yes,
What are you bringing, man? All the time, man.
yeah.
But what three rules would you hope that your players? I usually ask this about kids,
Hmm.
but I'm going to ask about your players. What three rules would you hope that your players follow when they transition out of sports and go into the real world?
I think number one, they have to approach life after football, basketball, whatever it may be, with the same vigor that they approached the time that they played. Um, they have to appreciate what they learned in those high pressure situations and understand that they have a lot more value than they realize. Because sometimes, like, to my earliest comments, like you're now not competing against the player across from you. You're competing against thousands and thousands and thousands of people. So how do you define yourself without having the background, let's say, to compete with some of these other people? So, how do you articulate it? How do you prepare yourself like you prepared in your sport for life after sport? It's very important that, I think my preparation now for what I do in my role is far better than I ever prepared, playing in sports. And I, outside of a couple instances, I was well prepared. Like I understood the game and I was always in shape and the rest of that stuff. But, and I would just say, you have to really respect yourself too, as a person. Understand you don't know everything, and be able to take criticism. It's tough sometimes to take criticism, right? You understand in the world of sport, the hardest criticism for me was my peers. Like watching game film the next day, I was like, oh, please don't show this play. Because you're not
No,
hiding
you
at
know this.
all.
No, no.
Nothing worse.
And they're never an easy room. There's never an easy
No,
room, man. Like, there's
nothing
always somebody
worse.
paying for you.
Oh, so you know, really understanding who you are, using everything you learned, being respectful of the people around you, and in approaching the next phase in your life with the same passion that you approached the first phase, um, are really the keys, in my opinion, to kind of being able to be that kind of good steward going forward. And um, in Canada, in Canadian sport, domestic sport, none of us are at the opportunity to walk away millionaires, right? So you really have to understand that that was a phase that you went through, and it's going to provide you with a lot of benefits that others don't have, but don't take them for granted, right? Because there's a lot of passionate people out there and hungry people that have a lot of years left. And that goes for sports too, because you're done in your 30s, generally speaking, if you last long enough. And
Yeah.
then you're just a normal dude that used to play sports. I always people like, oh, you used to play. I said, yeah, I used to be cool. That's it. Like I used to be cool. I'm maybe not so cool anymore, but at one time it was. So at least I thought I was.
Yeah. I had a moment with my son. He's 18 and he's big kid, 6'2", 6'3", somewhere in there, 210, 220. And he didn't play any contact sports. His mother and I are divorced. I've been for a number of years, so I couldn't get him any team sports. It was tough for me.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to see him, because he's also competitive and he's smart, right? And he gets into rugby when he turns 17. He plays rugby. He calls me one day. He says, Dad, you don't understand. Like people just don't even want to, like on my own team, they just don't even want to go anywhere near me. I said, oh, I know, I get it. He says, no, like you don't understand. Like I can just impose my will on people. And I said, I kind of understand.
Yes.
I get it, but I'm glad he doesn't remember because he doesn't even know that guy, right? Like
Right.
he doesn't know that guy.
Yeah.
And maybe someday he'll discover, maybe he won't, but it's good either way, right?
It's when I finished playing, I did not have any children at that time, so none of them saw me play football. So it's kind of weird, and I'm remarried and whatever. So like we'll be out and people will, especially around here, because people know me, will want my attention or want to talk to me, whatever. And then my kids are like, what's going on? Like, why do they want to talk to you, Dad? So it's very humbling to be, for that experience to come. And, they just know by, well, hell, you can't even show them game film or tapes because half of them don't exist because they're on VHS or beta. So it's not like you go on YouTube and watch highlights. So they got to take your word for it, I guess. So
that's not so bad, man.
Not so bad.
Okay, well, listen. How old are your kids, man? How old are your kids?
I have two daughters. One is 9. One turned 16 the end of this month, and
Wow.
I love it. I mean, again, say, "Oh, don't you wish you had a boy?" To whatever. Nope, I don't. I just love my kids. I mean, it wouldn't have mattered to me. I'm kind of fortunate. You got two girls that'll take care of me, hopefully, when I'm old and hobbled. They love their dad. I love them. I'm really excited for what's happening in women's sports for that reason. Like I see where, my children now, if they choose to, because I certainly don't pressure them, they could have a chance to maybe do something similar to what I did. Right. And, the playing field's getting a little bit leveled. The opportunities are increasing. So that's really cool and encouraging. But I grew up in a household that never pushed me to do anything, ever. My dad wouldn't let me play football till grade 10. So I didn't start playing football to grade 10. I started really late. I was a football fan because my family's a football fans. Of course, my cousin Paul Masadi played and his brother Christian played. So I was always wanted to be a football player. But so I don't push my kids. My little one is a nut. She's just would race anything and challenge anything and jump and this. And my older one grew into be this really good athlete that just decided, maybe I want to work now, Dad. I'm like, you do whatever you want to do. You know what I mean? To me, it's not about, I'm not forcing any of them to do anything. I always tell them, if you need my support and my help, I've done a few of these things. I can help you. But you know how it is with kids. They don't really want your help until they need your help. So I'll let them figure that out for themselves.
Yeah, I used to be a kid, so I totally know how that is.
Oh, yeah.
If you could give your daughters one rule to follow, I won't make you go through all three. Aside from what you've said about your athletes, what would you hope that they do? One rule that they could follow to be safe and happy and healthy and have a meaningful life.
Respect themselves and respect others. I mean, I just believe you need to carry yourself in a way where you treat everybody equally. I really do. Like, I don't want them to ever think that they're better than anyone else, or worse for that matter. Like, I just want them to understand that everybody's equal and to treat everybody fairly. That's the way I grew up. There was no color, there was no race, there was no religion, and it was just everybody's equal. You help everybody out, you lend a helping hand, and I encourage my kids to be that way. Right? I don't want them to judge people. There is no judgment, in our household, and if things go wrong, they go wrong. But my hope is that they're good, respectful people, like my parents, taught me to be. And they taught me to be not by, hey, you need to do this and this. They just taught me to be that way by me watching them.
Yes.
So that's something I think that I hope to pass down to them, and I hope they appreciate.
You know what I love? I've heard you say that twice now in this conversation, and both times I've wanted to say it, so I'll say it now. I love that you put the stress on respect and not on loving yourself. There's so much emphasis put on just follow your heart and love yourself, and just listen, man. It starts with respecting yourself.
Yeah.
If you can respect yourself, you can get a lot of things done, and you can avoid a lot of mistakes.
Of course, and you can learn to respect. You're going to have times where you look at yourself, like I do now, and maybe in retrospect, and say, "Oh, I wish I would have done this," but you still have a chance to learn from that. And I'm not trying to get all philosophical. It's just the way that I believe that I'm in an industry now where I don't care so much whether people like me, not because I'm a tyrant. I'm the total opposite of that, but I do care that they respect me. Right?
Yes.
Because I had coaches I didn't like, but I respected the hell out of them. And I'll play for somebody I respect, and I'll follow somebody that I respect. And whether I like him or not is a bonus. The fact is, you really got to. That to me was, really important. Still is to this day.
It's interesting. I would play harder for people I respected than people I liked.
Right.
Right.
Agreed.
It's just a true fact, right?
Yeah.
It's a true fact. Mike, you're a champion, man. I
likewise.
Come down and catch a game. I got to come down and catch
Please
a game.
do.
So I'm going to hit you up for free tickets. That's what I'm
100%. Anytime, anywhere. You let me know.
Awesome, brother. Thank you so much for your time, man. You carried this interview. I really appreciate you.
I appreciate you having me on. Good luck with this, and I hope I see you soon.
Yeah, will do. Sounds good, man.
Thanks,
God bless. Take care.